time for my favorite subject on the Sports PSP podcast, Babyface or Heel. Now, for those who may not know what a babyface heel means in wrestling language, babyface is a good guy, heel is a bad guy, a tweener is someone in between babyface or heel. The first person regarding for babyface or heel, Sean Taylor.
Babyface.
Easy.
Yes,
Babyface.
especially with all the criticism that he received from Colin Cowherd.
Yes.
And remember how it looked and how the people portrayed Sean Taylor. But Sean Taylor, if you listen, and again, that's one of the reasons why I became a Washington Commanders fan, because of Sean Taylor. Anytime when I say I became a fan because of him, I don't get any flack. I don't get any criticism. It was sad that his career was cut short at the age of 24. The man had a lot to look forward to, not just with football, but also with his family, his wife, his kids. If you just listen to some of his former players from Washington and Miami, Clint Portis, Santana Moss, Ryan Clark, Greg Olson, Jeremy Shockey, they love Sean Taylor. And he was a hell of a safety. Had it not been for his death, I think he could have been the greatest to ever do it. Because he had size. Remember that Pro Bowl hit that he had
on Brian Mormon, the punter.
That will be indelibly etched in everybody's mind, man. That was what the Pro Bowl was versus where it is. That personified where it was versus what it is today.
And helped Washington back in 2005 to win a playoff game under the Daniel Snyder stewardship.
Yeah,
and Sean Taylor, man, I miss him, man. I just miss him. I just miss what he was as a football player. Man, that's gonna be one of the, to me, that's like one of the biggest what ifs. What if Sean Taylor had it not been for his death? He could have been what could have been, what should have been, because he was on his way to becoming one of the greatest safeties to ever do it. I mean, of course, Brian Dawkins, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu. Sean Taylor, had it not been for his death, would definitely be in that conversation with greatest safety of all time. Not saying he would have been the greatest, but he definitely would have been in that conversation. And let's not forget what he was for the Miami Hurricanes when they won that national championship. When he was like, I think, Chip, as a freshman?
Yeah. He didn't have a big part in that national championship.
He didn't have a big part of it. He had a little bit.
He definitely, the very next year, when that graduating class, he was a big part of that secondary, and he was a big part of that championship of that team that was trying to go back to back. The reason why I always say he's a babyface is because a lot of the media will love to shit on your name, and forgive me for saying that. They love to shit on people's names. And then when it comes out that it was inaccurate and not who he was, then the apologies aren't as loud as the criticism. The only problem that I ever really seen with Sean Taylor was, the whole spitting incident with Michael Pittman. That was the only kind of thing that you really looked at and say, hey, man, you could have handled that a little bit better. And I know youth is not an excuse, as you say, but, you make a lot of mistakes when you're young. But outside of that, hell of a ball player, hell of a family man. You talked about how, a lot of his brothers and sisters went to foster homes, and he was able to get the family back together. And what's so funny about, well, it's not funny, it's quite fucking sad, to be honest with you, is because the first thing that people did when that young man passed away is they wanted to make it gang related so damn bad.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to be gang related and stuff like that. And then nobody came out. Even the great Michael Wilbon, who I have great respect for, he didn't come out and he didn't rescind statements. And this is a guy that, Michael Wilbon was a guy who was with the late great John Thompson when he went to talk to Rayful Edmond about Alonzo Mourning. Because remember, back in the day, Alonzo Mourning, we used to be real cool with Rayful Edmond. If you don't know who Rayful Edmond is, please go look him up. But he was real cool with Rayful Edmond. They was like best friends. But John Thompson had to go to Rayful Edmond and tell him to stay away from his player. He had a bright future. That's how much respect Michael Wilbon had. He wasn't just one of these journalists that was just out there because, of a name. He was actually getting the scoop. He covered that Georgetown team for a hell of a long time, covered John Thompson for a long time. But for a lot of the media to come out and say that and then not run it back and say, we apologize for that. We sorry about making it gang related and trying to make it gang related and stuff like that. And a lot of it had to do with him being from the U and
as you always say, the Notre Dame versus Miami, Catholics versus convicts.
Yeah, there was there was still a lot of stigma from the U, even from back. And the thing is, the U had changed. What people don't understand is the new University of Miami, not the old one. Back in the 80s, it was a lot of, trouble in Miami. 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of trouble in Miami. If you go back and look at the second documentary of the U, those guys were exact the opposite. He was like, bro, we was going to class. We was graduating. We was trying to do stuff. We was trying to do stuff completely the opposite of what the former Miami teams do. Now, we looked up to those guys, but we was trying to do things completely the opposite. So they was trying to do things different. So for that to come out, nobody ever apologized about it. I think that's a sad world that we live in. And the apologies are always quiet. They're never as loud as the criticism. But John Taylor, and you should hear how his daughter talks about him right now.
Yeah.
You should hear how his daughter talks about him right now. Babyface, man. Like I said, that one incident with Michael Pittman. All right, cool. Everybody makes mistakes. But, the reason I label him a babyface, one of the main reasons why I label him a babyface is because of how bad the media crapped on him during his death, and they never walked it back. But like I said, that's the media for you. It's not important for them to be accurate. I believe it's important for them to be right. There's a difference between being accurate and being right. Being accurate is when you got all your facts straight. You got all of your story right. You got everything in a bubble. Being right is just when you want to put out a narrative just because it's a popular narrative. And I believe in that situation, it was important that they were right rather than getting their facts straight. And that's something that I will always hold against the mainstream media. And I think that was one of the downfalls of mainstream media was when that happened. But rest in peace to the late, great Sean Taylor. Hell of a football player, hell of a man. His daughter speaks very, very highly of it. And look, man, as a girl, BRF, you know this, man. You know this for a fact. For you to have been dead for so many years, for your daughter to still speak highly of, that's the greatest reward any man who's a girl dad could ever have. My father talks about that every single day. So, yeah.
BRF?
I mean, it's Babyface. I mean, this isn't even a discussion. No, I was going through I'm going through Pro Football Reference right here, and I'm looking at Sean Taylor, and you could just kind of get a sense. Like his rookie year was good in 2004. He finished fourth in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting. And 2005 he had another good year. But 2006, like you could really see like what he was about to become. Like he only had one interception, but I mean he had 7 pass defense, 3 forced fumbles, 114 tackles. And in 2007, like before he died, like he was having arguably one of the greater safety seasons we had seen in a while. Like, yeah, he had like 41 tackles, but that dude already had 5 interceptions, and he did all that in 9 games.
5 good hands. He also had very good hands.
he always had an amazing set of hands. Like he had amazing ball skills. Like
Yeah.
Sean Taylor was the type of athlete at the University of Miami. He could play corner and he could play safety. That's the type of athlete Sean Taylor was before he ultimately did the right thing with his size, being 220, being 220, 6'2", 230 pounds, and just ultimately moving to free safety. Like that was the right move. Like he needed to be a free safety at his size, but with his ball skills. And just you knew what he was about to be. And then December losing his life like that. I mean, I feel like it's one of the more tragic stories over the last really of the 21st century in terms of sports, as far as what Sean Taylor was starting to turn into and how we had a Hall of Fame career, a possible top 5 safety in the history of the sport ripped away from us so tragically like that. Like just and Champ was talking about it. Like his like one of the cooler things I've seen recently was I can't like they were I can't remember what show it was, but it was Ocho Cinco and Ryan Clark,
Oh yeah, I'm watching it
and
right
they
now.
were kind of
Inside the NFL,
yeah,
he's handing
and they were
him.
doing
He
it was inside the NFL, and they were doing the Secret Santa, and Chad Johnson was Ryan Clark's Secret Santa, and Chad Johnson gave him a painted portrait of Ryan Clark and Sean Taylor, and I thought and something like that as a football fan should have hit everybody in the fields because like those Miami Hurricane years, like that '02 Miami squad that beat Nebraska in the national championship game, like Andre Johnson, Sean Taylor, Antrell Roll, Philip Buchanan, Bryant McKinney, like Kellen Winslow Jr., like just like one like that assembly of just talents on that squad, like Frank Gore, Willis McGahee, um, just that one of the greatest collections of just sheer talents we've ever seen in college football. And like we were that was like our teenage early adult years, like growing up with that Miami Hurricane squad, and then a lot of them going into the pros and ultimately becoming the pros, a lot of them becoming like really really good pros, some of them becoming Hall of Fame pros. But like yeah, Sean Taylor I feel like would have gone down as a top 3 to 5 safety ever, because the trajectory when his in his '06 and his '07 seasons before he was shot and killed, that trajectory was starting to head that way. And just everything, his ability to play center field, his hands, his tackling, sure, always a sure tackler. One of the biggest hitters we've ever seen. Ultimately, I think it's what does it for a lot of us when it comes to Sean Taylor is just how his family talked about him, how his teammates talked about him. You could just tell the growth and the maturity and the type of man he was becoming, especially, and especially like having his daughter. Like you could just tell what he was starting to become, and you could just see it. And then to have it just ripped away like that is just is so unfortunate and so tragic. But I mean, just going back, being a football fans and still being able to have his college highlights and his pro highlights, is one of those. It's kind of one of those things you want to frame into a time capsule of sports, and you just want to keep it because we all know what type of athlete and we all know what type of player Sean Taylor was about to be. So rest in peace to the late great Sean Taylor. It was amazing watching that man play and do his thing. And hey, even not being a Washington Commanders fan, one of my favorite. They ultimately their defense was one of my favorite units to watch
him, London
Because of Sean
Fletcher,
Taylor, and London Fletcher and Champ Bailey
Bailey,
and
Ryan
just
Clark as well for a little
yeah,
bit.
and Ryan Clark as well, because he was really starting to come into his own in Washington before he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So man, just that was one of my favorite units to watch. So yeah, man, rest in peace to Sean Taylor, definite babyface. And it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see, in my opinion, the top 5 safety of all time career just blossom. I mean, it's just so unfortunate.
Yeah, man. Shame, but hearts and prayers, and but gone, but never forgotten.
Amen to that.
This one is a pretty babyface as a head coach, Popovich.
Oh yeah,
Babyface.
easy.
Easily military man and veteran. He may not have. I love how he does the interviews with the media, is particularly with him and the late great Craig Sager. God rest his soul. I always love the interviews that he did with Craig Sager and Popovich. I love how he attacks President Trump. I'm sorry when Popovich talks his talk about President Trump and how he talks about this world and this society. You all right, BRF?
Oh no, man! I'm just no. You know me. I'm a Russ head, and I'm just looking at SmackDown right now, and they're just announcing some of the matches for next week.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, they gonna have some. Yeah, man. They trying to turn
Elimination
up a little bit.
Chamber.
They got some. Huh?
Elimination Chamber.
Yeah, they're announcing the Yeah, they announced the next men's qualifying match for next week. It's Damian Priest, Carmelo Hayes, and Trick Williams in a triple threat for an elimination chamber spot. And if you watched NXT, you know the history that Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams have. So I'm kind of liking that they're about to revisit that rivalry a little bit. It's pretty sweet.
Yes, indeed.
It's pretty interesting. But back to Popovich, man, babyface. I mean, he has championships. You can make an argument he's the greatest head coach, even though you can argue Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Greg Popovich belongs in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why, champ, I have him more of a babyface compared to Phil Jackson is because he allows people to say what's on their mind. Phil Jackson was like keep politics, keep stuff out of sports. You don't hear that with Popovich. Whether you agree or disagree, Popovich is going to allow you to express yourself. Just like yourself, champ, he comes from a military background. Popovich is no nonsense. And he is adamant and persistent. And he's all about unity. And I just love how joyful he is, particularly with Craig Sager, God rest his soul. Love Craig Sager, love the outfits. I thought KG at times was a little too hard on Craig Sager, but Popovich, man, what more could you ask? And him still being around the Spurs organization and also helping out Becky Hammon as well too, as
Yes.
far as becoming a coach. And you look at his coaching tree, Budenholzer. You look at Ime Udoka, Becky Hammon. Yeah, there's a lot of good players, and also too with the Spurs organization, they also got some international players such as Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. And the Spurs way, how the way they play basketball. The Spurs were the New England Patriots of basketball. That's what they were. And when I look at Popovich and I look at his leadership, and like I said, I'll say it again. I don't give a damn if them Trump supporters get mad at me. The way he calls out Trump, hey, he my guy. So for me, it's pretty obvious for me. If y'all say he ain't a babyface, I don't know what the hell wrong with you, but he's a babyface. Ultimate babyface.
Yes. Ultimate babyface, man. I'll never forget the time where, I remember Shaq was playing for the Phoenix Suns, man. And like
Oh, when he joked him
no, when
with the
he was
free
Shaq was playing for
throws,
the Phoenix Suns
the
and
hacker shack.
and then he hit him
Yeah.
like Shaq got five like the first 5 minutes. He said, "I never forget the comments." They said, "Damn, they already hacking the Shaq." He's like, "No, that's great." So that was pretty good, man. I never forget doing the games, man. I want some nasty, and then you saw the memes. Back when memes were very very possible, were very very popular. You can't spell dynasty without nasty. So he was very very colorful on the sidelines, man. Regardless of him portraying himself as this, steel face type of guy. You knew that he was very, very colorful. He had the personality. And look, he was an underdog story. Remember, he was at first general manager of the San Antonio
Tony
Spurs
Spurs, yeah.
before he fired the coach, and then he became the coach. Remember, he almost got fired. So, and then he won that first championship. And even after that first championship, people were saying it was a fluke. If there was any organizations that revolutionized bringing in the the overseas and European players there had to be the Chicago Bulls and San Antonio Spurs, because when you think about Tony Kukoc, and then you think about Manu Ginobili, you think about Tony Parker, you think about Victor Wembanyama, you think about Boris Diaw, Tiago Flinner, you think about all of those
Marco
guys. All of those
Bellinelli.
guys, yes, all those guys were overseas players. So they were, look, the Spurs were ahead of their time with the overseas play. They were ahead of their time. They was drafting these guys tops. They were way much ahead of their time. So, before it became popular, the Spurs and the Bulls were already ahead of the game. Oh, and the Lakers as well. Remember, Ronnie Divac, he was from Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you think about guys who were discovering their overseas guys before that. The Lakers, the Bulls, and especially the Spurs come to mind. The Spurs in particular. Popovich, I think, is better than Phil Jackson because he was able to build teams. He was able to retool those teams. He was able to, build with the San Antonio, the first part of it. He won with the Twin Towers, the first and the second championship, and then on the back end of it, he was able to bring in a lot of other utility players to complement Tim Duncan. He was able to bring in Kawhi Leonard. He was able to bring in Boris Diaw. He was able to bring in Steven Jackson in free agency. He was able to bring in a lot of other guys. So he won by building the team, not just being a beneficiary of a team that is put together. When you think about the teams that Phil Jackson had, there were teams that were already put together with the exception of the last two championships. When you think about his first three championships with the Chicago Bulls, that team was already built. They just needed somebody to get them over the top.
Yeah.
1-6. When you think about at the beginning for my Los Angeles Lakers, glad to have him. But the thing is, that team was already built. Free agency, Shaquille O'Neal, Nick Van Exel. Drafted Nick Van Exel. Drafted Eddie Jones. Drafted Kobe Bryant. Brought in Dennis Rodman in free agency. And people don't like to acknowledge this. Although Phil was a hell of a coach, he was the beneficiary first, especially during them first 9 championships. Some first 9 championships that he won. Phil Jackson, hell of a coach. But he also was the beneficiary of having the 2 greatest general managers arguably of all time.
And Jerry Krause and Jerry West.
The late great Jerry Krause and the late great Jerry West. So you got to think about that.
And to a lesser extent, Mitch Kupchak. We can't disregard Mitch Kupchak.
Mitch Kupchak, because he was able to pull off that hell of a trade for Pau Gasol, not to mention, drafted Andrew Bynum and was able to bring Metal World Peace to town. So he was able to do a lot of great things. So you were the coaching guru, but at the same time, you were not the talent scout and you were not able to build teams from the ground up. You had to come in with a product that's already finished. That's part of the reason why he didn't want to return to Chicago at the end of it, because more than likely they were going to be rebuilding. And you saw what happened. He went there and won a championship with Los Angeles with a team that was already built. Like I stated, he couldn't build teams. Greg Popovich was able to build teams. And in the midst of him rebuilding, he was able to keep the roster competitive every single year. So Greg Popovich, man, I admire him a lot. Started from a Division III school, Coach of the Year multiple times. He often talks about that. If you would have told me that I would have came from a Division II, Division III school to end up being Coach of the Year, I'd have called you a liar. Beat some of the greatest teams of all time in the finals, on the way to the finals. Beat them. Was able to overcome the Shaq and Kobe Lakers in order to win his second title on the last leg of David Robinson. Was able to derail what would have been a dynasty with the Bad Boy Pistons Part 2. Was able to overcome a team from New Jersey, the New Jersey Nets, with Kmart Kenyon Martin and Jason Kidd. was
Jerry
able to
Kittles,
be,
Keith Van Horn, yeah.
yes, was able to overcome arguably one of the greatest teams ever put together in the new generation, that being the 2014 Miami Heat. I
And let's
mean,
not forget the Detroit Pistons in that
yeah,
04-05 finals.
yeah, I brought up the Bad Boys Part 2. Bad
Oh,
Boys
okay.
Part 2.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, it's all good, man. There's no apologies needed. You're looking out for me. You gotta,
Hmm.
you're looking out for your people.
But yeah, man, Babyface, he fits
Babyface.
that mold. And besides,
Yeah.
man, he carries himself and his coaching tree. You look at the coaches that have come from Greg Popovich's coaching tree that have flourished.
Yeah. And only at the Spurs could the first woman to ever coach an NBA game happen. And that was Becky Hammond. Even NBA players speak on highly about Becky Hammond and how she could become an NBA coach one day. Ironically, the Las Vegas Aces, they are from their original owners was San Antonio Spurs. You know, they just end up moving to Las Vegas. So if you really look at the ball movement that the Las Vegas Aces do, Asia Wilson is essentially their Tim Duncan. So, except, on the women's side, she is the centerpiece of that team. So when you think about Greg Popovich, you think about an honorable man who just so happens to coach, not a coach who's an honorable man. So that's just how it goes with Greg Pop. And I'm glad that he speaks out on a lot of the social issues. And with him being in the military background, and you can understand why he would very much take issues with our seating commander in chief about some of his views, especially when he's done something that he never did in that service country in a capacity that only a select few can. So you see why he would take issue with that. I mean, at times I take issue with a lot of things because guess what? I served. I actually got out there, and it's a volunteer army, and during a time where everything was going haywire from 2000, in the 2000s, where everything was at its worst. Yes, you had young men like myself who went out there and put it all on the line. So yeah, I understand exactly why Greg Popovich would look at him and say, "Hey," especially when you have a lot of our former presidents who were generals, Dwight Eisenhower, him being one of the few. Remember, President Bush, he was an Air Force reservist at one point. So when you think about that, you see why he has so much to say about him. And quite frankly, as a former vet, as a current veteran, I don't blame him for a lot of the things that he said. But Greg Popovich, 5 championships. 5 championships don't necessarily tell the story. The fact that you was able to keep a team in the playoff relevant in championship contention nearly every single year. For over 20 years, you made the playoffs. 20 long years. 20 long years. You was able to keep your team in contention without bringing in a lot of big-time free agents, if you really want me to be honest. They would bring in the utility free agents. They would bring in the Mario Ellies. They would bring in the Sean Elliott's. They would bring in, Avery Johnson, guys like
Yes.
that. But there was never the only big-time free agent that they had that I can personally think of is when they had that 67 and 10 year, or the 67 and 15 year when they had LaMarcus
Here's
Aldridge.
Aldridge.
Yeah, that was the biggest free agent acquisition. Usually when you see teams that are relevant like that, they are able to bring in free agents. If they're not able to draft well, they're able to bring in free agents.
Well, it was easier to bring in LaMarcus because he wanted to put himself in the best position possible to compete for a championship. And on top of that, he's from Texas.
Yes.
So that does help. He used to play, I believe, at the University of Texas.
That's right.
And when I think with Popovich, again, he's about team, he's about results, he's about his business, and he's all about unity. And he has integrity. That's the beauty of Popovich. And I just think that's why I call him a babyface. BRF.
I mean, yeah, there's really not too much more to add to Popovich being a babyface because he's definitely a babyface. But yeah, I love the New England Patriots comparison when it comes to the San Antonio Spurs because they won in such similar fashions. Like not just from like the X's and O's standpoint, but with the focus being on the defensive side of the ball, but just like in the times in which you were doing it. Like we give the New England Patriots so much credit for winning, like at a time as far as like the salary cap, when rosters would turn over like clockwork on a yearly basis, but yet still being able to kind of build around your core guys, which honestly the only core guy that Bill Belichick had was pretty much Tom Brady. Like the common denominator of all those teams was him and Brady being that battery. With the San Antonio Spurs, it was him and Tim Duncan. Like whether it was him and like David Robinson, like winning those first two titles before David Robinson retired, and then you built that core as far as like Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. It's just a matter of understanding your important pieces, but being able to adapt and build around them, but still keep the same level of consistency, the same level of just being able to compete night in and night out, and being able to contend for championships year in and year out, and to be able to win, to be able to basically like 5 in the 20-year stretch, which is basically one every 4 years. I mean, that just speaks to the players that you're bringing in. It speaks to Popovich as a coach, because in my opinion, I think he is the greatest X's and O's coach in the history of the league. I think he's the greatest. I just look at it from a standpoint of just being able to coach players basically coming in and out of a revolving door and still being able to maintain a high level of play regardless of what your rosters is. And that's also a shout out to to that front office, like with a gentleman like RC Buford operating in the front office, being able to work with Greg Popovich and being able to identify talent, to acquire that talent, and being able to bring that talent in and mold with Popovich in his scheme to be able to go out and win night in and night out. But Greg Popovich is such a good man in terms of just his views, his integrity, his mentality. Just he doesn't change for anybody, because he doesn't have to change for everybody, because he already knows what type of man he is, and we know what type of man he is. We know how good of a guy he already is, so he doesn't need to change for anybody. Like when his wife passed away, we all felt for him. Like we all felt for him, because we know what type of man, we know what type of guy he is, we know what type of man he is, we know what he represents on and off the court. So us, even being fans, we all felt for him. We all when his wife passed away, we all had a little spot kind of like ripped away, because we respect how much of a guy Greg Popovich is. So I feel like the whole NBA world was able to kind of center itself and surround him with all the love that he deserved at the time, because we know what type of man he is. So it's just one of those things where it's like now he's just kind of enjoying his life after basketball, and deservedly so. If anybody deserves it, it's him, because I mean he's had his health problems and everything, but I mean, how many, he deserves like all the good things, like as far as like what he's accomplished and what he's done in the sport. Like I said, I personally have him as the greatest coach in the history of the league. And I think on top of that, yeah, I think Champ said it best. He's an honorable man who just so happens to be a hell of a coach. I mean, you can't ask for nothing more than that from a guy like Greg Popovich. So he's most definitely a babyface.
All right, last one. I think it's pretty obvious for Babyface. Hakeem Olajuwon.
Oh yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Only remember 93, 94. Became the first player to win MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, win the championship, and Finals MVP. His post moves, his footwork. Remember, Hakeem Olajuwon, for those who may not know, used to play soccer back in the day. I remember, didn't he play basketball? He was on some podcast or whatever with Kevin Durant, and he didn't start playing basketball until high school, probably around his junior or senior year. But the footwork, the fadeaway shot that he had, let's not forget the 94-95 Houston Rockets championship run. We keep talking about Dirk and that championship run the Dallas Mavericks had, but 94-95, you went up against the Houston Rockets, Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns, the year when David Robinson won the 94-95 MVP. And I think Kenny Smith said it was personal because when Hakeem Olajuwon saw David Robinson win the MVP, when the year before Hakeem won it, Hakeem kind of took it personal. And man, he was putting them moves, them footwork moves. And let's not forget him winning the finals against Shaq in Shaq's third season. Hakeem Olajuwon, even though the sky hook to me is the most unstoppable move, but the most unbelievable move is the dream shake. Hakeem's footwork is something to behold, man. Incredible footwork for a guy his size. He had moves, guard moves at 7 feet, whatever. Off the court, of course, he is a devoted Muslim. He has even criticized the president himself. Um, and also too in the offseason, still lives in Houston. Takes time to help out big men, learn how to play within the post. Also worked out with Kobe Bryant, rest his soul. Also worked out with LeBron James. Even tried to help out Dwight Howard. So when I look at Akeem Olajuwon, just his presence, and again how he was at the University of Houston too, I gotta say, Babyface. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, Babyface, man. Like I said, damn, people talk about that Dirk, and I said it before, and I say it again, man. People talk about Dirk in that 2011, that Akeem Olajuwon 94-95 season, coming from a 6 seed.
Yes.
A 6 seed. Remember, they didn't trade for Clyde Drexler until the middle of the season because they traded Jim Thorpe for him. So they didn't trade for him until they damn near had a losing record at that point in time. Rudy Donovan was like, this ain't working. I got to get something going. And remember, a lot of guys didn't want Clyde on that team. Remember, Robert Horry, I never forget, I saw the Clutch City documentary. You know, he yelled at him one time, like, hey, man, we got to get back. And he walked over to him and said, don't you ever blank. Yeah, they did not like each other on that team other than that. Other than Hakeem. Hakeem wanted him on the team. A lot of guys didn't want him there. You know, Jim Thorpe was their dude. But for them to, I've said it before and I'll say it again, for them to overcome Charles Barkley, the Phoenix Suns, Karl Malone, and John Stockton, David Robinson, and Dennis Rodman, at that time was one of the best defensive teams in the league. And then you go and chase Shaq and Penny, and then you sweep them.
Yes. And throughout the postseason, the 95 postseason, Hakeem Olajuwon averaged 33 points, 10.3 rebounds, and nearly 3 blocks.
Yes. Not to mention, I never forget, he played the Ramadan game. Remember,
Yes.
you know, if y'all know anything about how the Muslim culture is, Ramadan, you can't drink or eat anything until the sun goes back down. And he played an afternoon game during the middle of Ramadan. And if you look, I'm just going to be real. I've been an athlete before. I've been a boxer. I've been an offensive line. Hell, I even was a goalie when it came to street hockey. If you ain't ate before a game, that's how come they give you the pregame meal. So you can have some energy out there. That's why they give you the pregame meal. So you can actually have some energy. If you running on fumes, you're not going to be very useful. For him to have one of his greatest games is nothing short of amazing. Not to mention, I think he's one of the few guys in the history of the NBA that has a quadruple double. He has a quadruple double. So, and look, he's more than just an offensive presence. I don't know what they used to call Houston back in the day. This was before the Golden State Warriors. They called them small ball with a big problem. And that big problem was Hakeem Olajuwon. And I'll never forget something that Phil Jackson even said. Well, they said he said, thank God that those guys never made it out of the West when we was at our peak. Because I don't know how the hell I would deal with that big monster in the middle. Because remember, Phil didn't like the double team. And it would have been interesting to see what Bill Cartwright or either Luke Longley would have did against Hakeem Olajuwon. Probably not much. So you probably would have had to put Dennis Rodman on it. And people don't understand that David Robinson, you faced the front court of David Robinson, who's one of the best defensive centers ever to be in the league. And you faced David Robinson. That team's cornerstone was defense. And you still could not beat it. He still could not contest with it. So that was amazing, man. That 94-95 season, that was better than Dirk's season. If you really want me to be honest with you, not just because of them coming from a 6 seed, it's because they had to come from behind in that Phoenix Suns series. Remember, they had to come from behind 3-1. Came from behind from 3-1. And they did the same thing the year before with I remember the Kiss of Death game. Mario Elliott, the Kiss of Death game. Clutch City was one of those teams where it was like lightning in a bottle. And unfortunately, man, I'll say, much like how the Golden State Warriors is now, you're trying to retool it so quick so you can keep something on. I believe that's why it went down so quickly. You know, I really believe that had they retooled it in a way that was similar to what it was, where you have two big scorers, you have the first two options, then you have the other utility players, the rotational players, that would have been a lot better. I think Robert Orr said it best. If we would have traded to get Kevin Willis and Eddie House, I think we would have been a lot better off. Because when you have Shaq, Hakeem, and Clyde Drexler, that's too many cooks in the kitchen as far as scoring was concerned. We needed some Doberman. We needed some dogs on defense to help out Hakeem on the defensive side of the ball. We didn't need another scorer in the form of Charles Barkley. Now, to their credit, they made it to the Western Conference Finals. Unfortunately, they lost out to the Utah Jazz in both years. But Hakeem in that 94-95 season, better than Dirk, hands down. Like I said, you're coming from a 6 seed. I mean, that team barely had a winning record going down the stretch. You make a desperation trade in order to get better.
And you came back from a 3-1 deficit against the Suns, who a couple years, they were in the NBA Finals.
Yes, they did. They did that 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
They did that 2 years in a row. Like I said, the Kiss of Death game when, Mario Elliott, he hit the shot and kissed the crowd goodbye. So that was a run for the ages. And, hey, I know Hakeem Olajuwon gets a lot of credit for the 94-95 season, but I got to give him and Ralph Sampson a lot of credit for beating my Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in '86.
The year when they advanced to the finals and then lost to the Celtics.
Celtics, yes.
Him and
the Twin Towers.
Yep, the Twin Towers, yeah.
So, I got to give him a hell of a lot of credit because he was great even back then. So,
well, he was great coming out of the University of Houston.
Yeah, he was great at the University of Houston. Him, Clyde Drexler, Benny Anders, all of those guys, man, they were spectacular, man. It was, I never forget, they said coming into Houston, it's like coming to the landing strip. It was dunks all day long. Man. So, Babyface and magnificent player, magnificent man.
All right, BRF, you're up next, and I don't know what's going on. There's somebody doing laundry or something.
No, I think it might have been like my sister. It might have been my sister going on. Those going on. But yeah, okay. He's a baby. But he's a baby face now. I appreciate Champ bringing up University of Houston, man. Five Slamma Jamma, man. Shout out to Five Slamma Jamma. I appreciate Champ bringing up the University of Houston. But yeah, he's a baby face. Yeah, bringing up y'all talking about the quadruple double. Yeah, Hakeem got the third one ever, 1990, 18 points, 10 assists, 16 rebounds, 11 blocks. So yeah, and it's crazy. David Robinson got the next one after that, and the closest we've gotten to that since was Josh Giddey last year against the Lakers. It was like 15 points, 17 assists, 10 rebounds, and 8 steals. That's the closest we've gotten to a quadruple double since. So that tells you how hard it is to get one of those. But yeah, Hakeem Olajuwon, in my opinion, I think is the greatest two-way player in the history of the league. When you talk about his peak in terms of how like his offensive game, what he became as an offensive player, but then his defense and what he brought to the defensive side, the defensive end of the court. I personally think he's the greatest two-way player ever. But there are other guys you could put in that conversation as well. I think in terms of two-way players, you could put Mike in that conversation. You could put Kareem in that conversation. There are other guys you could put in that conversation as far as like being the greatest two-way players ever. I personally think it's Hakeem, but like his philanthropy, just I mean, it's really nothing bad. With a lot of guys like him, there's nothing bad that you can really say about a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon. Um, and then just like his influence and just his contributions to the game as far as like working with some of the next generation of guys like just working. Yeah, you brought him up working with Brown and working with Kobe. I still feel like his notable one was working with Dwight, because I think Dwight had hit a point in his career where he was kind of like he was basically a one trick pony on offense, because I mean all he was doing was pretty much dunking. Like he really didn't have the footwork mastered as far as like being able to score in the post and all that. He was pretty much a one trick pony, and Hakeem helped his game offensively from that standpoint, working on his footwork, being able to do more as far as like touch around the rim and all that other stuff, and just not relying on the dunk to really score. So Hakeem really has really done a lot as far as his contributions and his influence to the game, and not to mention like like peak Hakeem Olajuwon is probably one of the greatest players we're probably ever going to see. Just like like I mean, it's like how like it's almost unheard of when you have a center, particularly with Hakeem playing at like I think Hakeem played at like 7'1", and like a guy that's capable of like like with the triple double, we brought up the quadruple double, a guy that can give you 30 points, 15 rebounds, can give you, 4 to 5 assists, but then can turn around and give you like 4 to 5 blocks a game. Like the dude was just on another level, and it's why he's in the Hall of Fame, why he's honestly, in my opinion, should be in a consensus top 10 player of all time, in my opinion. And I appreciate the fact that we're using our platform on Babyface Hill segment. I appreciated that we're using this platform to give a guy like Hakeem Olajuwon his flowers. So he definitely deserves all the shout outs that we're giving him. And like I have him in my top 10 of all time. So yeah, but yeah, no, he just for all of his contributions to the game, his influence and all that. Yeah, he's a baby face.
Yeah, obviously, that no doubt about it, babyface.